Hey guys, in this video we're going to show you how to make tepache, a traditional Mexican fermented drink made from pineapple. This is made from the bits of pineapple that you would usually throw out. It's really refreshing, slightly fizzy, but one thing to bear in mind that it does have some alcoholic content, about 0.5%, just like other fermented drinks like kombucha. But what they do in Mexico, for example, they use this as a mixer. So they mix it with beer and other alcoholic drinks, like gin is also an option, so you can improvise. But anyway, let's get into it. Cut the ends off. Cut off the skin in long strips like this. Cut off and discard any bruised pieces like this. Decore the pineapple fruit as you normally would. I've now separated the flesh from the core and the rind. I've split the cores and rinds into two because I'll be making two 2-liter jars of tepache. Along with these, I'm going to use about this much of the flesh across the two jars. You can choose to use more of the flesh if you want it to be sweeter, or you can just not use it at all. For ginger pieces, just make these sort of incisions so it releases the flavor. I'm making two 2-liter jars of tepache, but for just one jar you'll need 1.7 liters of filtered water, 125 grams of cane sugar or brown sugar, half of the pineapple's core and skin, about 75 grams of flesh. You can have more or less depending on how sweet you want tepache to be. Half a stick of cinnamon, 45 grams of ginger, and 1 clove. Stir and combine fully. This may seem like a lot of sugar, but once it ferments, this will reduce the sugar content. Add everything in, but leave the skins for last. Place the skins at the top. There's too much water in this jar, so I'm going to pour some out. I just got rid of this much water to end up with this level. You want some headroom for the gases to escape. We want to keep all the ingredients submerged at all times to avoid mold. Therefore, position the skins in a way which will stop the other ingredients from surfacing. Close the lid, make sure that water is not touching the lid. Cover it with something, keep it away from sunlight. We'll be checking on this every day, but the fermentation should take between 3 to 5 days. It's day 1, so we're going to check on it. As expected, there is no sign of fermentation just yet, but what we want to do is just make sure that nothing is floating up. This clove is floating, but that's fine, there's nothing you can do about it. But just making sure that no big pieces are emerging from the water. If they are, make sure you push it down and keep it under the liquid. Move the liquid around a bit to prevent mold from forming. And just do this every day over the next 3 to 5 days. We'll check on this next time. It's day 3, and as you can see, there are some white bits forming at the top. These are caused by the floating pieces of pineapple. So what you want to do is remove them. And then with a clean spoon, as before, stir the top part of the tepache. It's day 5 and you should see plenty of bubbles when you disturb the fruit in a jar. You should be able to smell the fermented juice, and I believe that this is ready to now second ferment. If you live in a warm country, then you may only need 3 days. Basically what you're looking for is no mold, no nasty smell. It should smell pleasant, and also do taste some, and it should be nice and sweet, and you should definitely be able to taste some of that fermented taste. If you've got a clip top bottle like this, that's great. If not, it's fine. We can also second ferment it in the same jar. Use a sieve and a funnel, and we need to filter. Make sure you leave some room at the top to account for the gas building up. Just for reference, this is what the pineapple skins should look like. So the colors should be quite dull and flesh should be really soft. I can throw this out now. This is how much tepache we ended up with. So seal it up, leave it on a counter, cover it with a cloth, and then check on it every day and taste it every day. Once it tastes good to you, you can put it in a fridge. We usually do the second ferment for about 2 or 3 days. It might be quicker if you're in a hot country. Bear in mind, the longer you second ferment it, more alcoholic it will become. So aim for about 2 or 3 days. However, if you actually see some mold, so these tend to be white, black or green, fuzzy specks, then you have to investigate. If they're small, in my experience, you can just scoop it out and that should be the end of it. But if you see large chunks of it, or if you see that they are replicating very quickly, then the tepache is contaminated and you will have to throw it out for safety. First day of second fermentation, I just opened up the jars just to check on them and also burp them to make sure that the gas doesn't build up and explode. So just looking out for making sure that there's no mold. Just gonna gently shake all of it just to make sure that mold doesn't develop. You might get a thin white film of yeast building up at top. That's completely fine. And you can skim it off if you want. Second day of the second fermentation, and as I mentioned earlier, there is this thin film of calm yeast forming. This is a completely safe type of yeast that comes up whenever you lacto-ferment vegetables or fruit. So best thing to do is to skim it off lightly because it can impart some unpleasant tastes, but completely take it off. If you, however, see some actual mold forming, as I mentioned earlier, then by all means don't risk it, throw it out and try again. Of course, you won't be able to skim all of it off, but that's completely fine. Seal these back up, cover them up, and test again tomorrow. Feel free to taste it at this point just to get an idea of how much fizziness it currently has. So this is the third day of second fermentation. I think I'm going to leave this to ferment for 1 more day before putting it in the fridge. Depending on where you live, if you live in a hot country, you may only need 1 or 2 days for the fermentation. So the best thing to do is to taste it, see how fizzy it is, make sure it still smells nice and sweet. For example, here you can see that yeast building up at the top. Feel free to remove that. As I said, I haven't really been able to taste much difference, to be honest, with or without it. But anyway, big things to look out for, of course, are any molds. And whenever you're happy with its taste, just sieve it back up, put it in the fridge and enjoy it for maybe next 2 weeks or until it lasts. You may notice some white residue building up at the bottom of your bottles. This is completely fine and safe. It's just some residue from the fermentation, which occurs whenever you're making a tepache or kombucha.